In this video, we'll be covering Chapter 2, Section 5, Survey Problems. In other words, the applications of using a Venn diagram. Okay. First example says, use the diagram to answer the questions. Okay. The CM means classical music, and then of course we have jazz. So question A, how many students listen to classical music? So when you're looking at the circle with the classical music, you're going to count all the individual numbers within that circle. You have 55 here, and you have 20 here, so the total is going to be 75. Part B, how many listen to jazz? So again, you're going to take the entire circle, and you're going to add up the numbers within that circle. So 70 plus 20 means that 90 people listen to jazz. How many people listen to both classical music and jazz? So that's that intersecting part here, which is just 20. Okay. Part D says how many listen to classical music or jazz? Now remember, when you have the word or, we're going to take all of the numbers that fall within both of the circles. Okay. So 55 plus 20 plus 70. Here we have 145. How many listen to classical music but not jazz? The only people who listen to classical music is right here. So that's 55. How many listen to jazz but not classical music? Well, that's on the other side of the circle. So here we have 70. Okay. How many listen to neither classical music or jazz? So in this, we're going to represent it by the people outside of that circle, which is 30. Okay, and then H says how many people were surveyed. So here you want to find out how many people are in the total universe. So we're adding up all of the numbers. The 55 plus 20 plus 70 plus 30. We get 175. In this question, it says a survey was taken that asked 1,700 random selected United States and French adults to agree or disagree with the following statement. It is the responsibility of the government to reduce income differences. The results show that 1,040 people agreed, 290 Americans agreed. If 110 adults were Americans, how many of the French agreed? So the first thing we're going to go ahead and do is create our diagram. Okay. Now, when you're creating these for the first time, it's going to be a little bit difficult. Okay. Normally what I would do in class is we would try and create it without having the answer key, but I want to tell you that each one of these circles has to represent different things. Okay. So we have Americans and we have French. We're going to go ahead and pick Americans as one of our circles. Okay. The other circle will have to be an agreed or disagreed. If we chose Americans here and we chose French here, we're never going to have both Americans and French. If we chose agreed here and not agreed here, we're not going to have people who are right in the middle. They're either going to agree with the statement or they're not going to agree with the statement. Therefore, you have to pick whether it's Americans or French here, and if they agree or disagree here. I'm going to go ahead and use the agreed. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and read the statement again. It says that the results show 1,040 people agreed. So in my agreed circle, I'm going to have a total of 1,040. Okay, it says 290 were Americans. So here we have Americans who agreed. We know that in between it was 290. Okay. Now if we go back to the agreed statement, it said that 1,040 people agreed, and we know that 290 of those people were Americans. We can actually solve for the number of French adults who agreed. So all we can do is solve for the number of people who agreed who were not Americans. So if 1,040 people agreed, 290 of them were Americans, that leaves 750 French agreed. Okay, so if I add these two together, you're going to get that total of 1,040. It says if 810 adults were Americans, so out of the entire group that I polled, I know the total Americans is 810. I also know that 290 agreed with this statement. We can solve for the number who did not agree with that statement. So we have 810 Americans, 290 agreed, that leaves 520 who did not agree. So I'm going to put the 520 here. Okay? All right, so the next thing says that a total of 1,700 randomly selected adults agreed or disagreed with the statement. So now let's go ahead and find out the number of French who disagreed. Remember, over here has the number of total Americans. Over here is the total number of French who agreed. We still need to find out the people who did not agree and they were French. That's going to go outside of the circle, okay? Because they don't fall in this group because these are only Americans, and these are going to be the people who agreed that were French. So we need the people who disagreed that were French here. We know that a total of 1,700 people were selected and surveyed. 520 were Americans who disagreed, 290 were Americans who agreed, and 750 were French who agreed, leaving a total of 140 French who disagreed with that statement. Okay? Now we're going to go ahead and answer the question. The first one says, how many French agreed? So over here we can see these are the people who agreed right here. These were the numbers who were Americans who agreed, so that means 750 French agreed. How many French disagreed? Well, that's out here. That would be the 140. I did all of the math here, and then French that disagreed were outside of the circle, 140 matches. The next question says, a survey of 250 memorabilia collectors showed the following results. 108 collected baseball cards, 92 collected comics, and 62 collected stamps. 29 collected both baseball cards and comic books, 5 collected baseball cards and stamps, and 2 collected comic books and stamps. 2 collected all 3. Create our Venn diagram. So in this case, we're going to need one with the 3. I'm going to go ahead and put that here. And each of these circles is going to be labeled for each of the types of memorabilia. Okay. Over here, we're going to have cards. Okay. We're going to have comic books here. And then we're going to have stamps down here. Always start in the middle. So I want to know how many collected all 3. Okay. Here it said 2 collected all 3 types. So I'm going to go ahead and put a 2 here. Okay. Now I'm going to choose between stamps and comics to be the next to fill in. It said 2 collected comic books and stamps. So here's my stamps and here's my comics. Okay. So if I'm looking at that complete circle, I want the total between comic books and stamps, these 2 areas, to add up to 2. Well, since we already have 2 that collect all 3, that means that there's no additional people who collect just stamps and comics. So we're going to have a 0 here. Okay? I'm going to go ahead and do the next one between stamps and baseball cards. And according to the statement, it said 5 collected baseball cards and stamps. So when I'm looking at just these 2 circles, it's not going to include this part here. All it's going to do is going to be looking at this intersecting part. Since 5 people collect baseball cards and stamps, 2 are already listed. That means that this number here has to be 3. Okay? Because these 2 numbers have to add up to 5. So 5 collects cards and stamps. Next section is going to be right here between baseball cards and comics. It says that 29 collected baseball cards and comic books. So now I'm going to be looking at the part that intersects the cards and the comics, which is this part here. Since it says that 29 collect baseball cards and comics, we already have 2 here, so I'm going to say 29 minus 2. That's going to get me this part here, which is 27. So here 27 people collect only baseball cards and comics. 2 collect all 3, but out of all the people surveyed, a total of 29 say they collect cards and comics. Okay, then we're going to end up doing the last 3 sections. So let's go ahead and start with baseball cards, and I'm going to use my calculator. So here it says 108 collected baseball cards. So in my calculator, I'm going to start with that 108. And then looking at just this circle, I'm going to subtract the numbers that are already written in. So I have 27, I have 2, and I have 3. So I have 76 people who just collect baseball cards. That number is going to go right here. For comics, I have 92 collected comic books, so we're going to start with 92. And then I'm looking at just this circle right here, so I have the numbers 27 and I have 2. So I'm going to say minus 27 minus 2. That gets me 63. That's the number of people who just collect comics. And for stamps, we have a total of 62 that collect stamps. So I'm going to start in my calculator with the number 62. And then I'm just looking at this one circle, so I'm going to subtract 3, and then I'll subtract 2. So that means 57 just collect stamps. Okay? Don't forget, you have to do the population of people who do not collect any of this type of memorabilia. So there was 250 people surveyed. I'm going to go ahead and put that in my calculator, 250. And now I'm going to take each of these numbers and I'm going to subtract. So minus 76, minus 27, minus 63, minus 3, minus 2, and minus 57. I have 22 people who do not collect baseball cards, comic books, or stamps. So now we've created our Venn diagram. Okay. When you look at the sheet, I actually write that same information I just went over with you out and show the math. Okay, on the next page, it actually asks us questions about the Venn diagram we just made. It says how many people collected comic books but neither baseball cards nor stamps. So we're going to go to our comic book section, which is right over here, and we want to know how many people collected comics but not baseball cards or stamps. So these people collected also baseball cards. These people collected stamps and cards and comics. So the number of people who just collected comic books would be 63. Okay, and your answer is down here. Part 2 says baseball cards and stamps but not comics. So we're going to look at the baseball cards and stamps, but we don't want the ones that have comics. So remember, for baseball cards and stamps, that would be this section here. This is the intersecting circle, but then we want to take out the comic section, so we're just left with 3. Which I have my answer there. C says baseball cards or stamps, but not comics. Okay. So baseball cards or stamps, but not comics. In this problem, you have to be careful because it's asking you that or statement. So you want to look at all of the baseball cards. You want to look at all of the stamps because it has that word or. It has that word or. But then it says not comics. So anything in the comic circle, which I'm going to go ahead and mark in blue, is this part. So we do not want the 27 or the 2. We only want the parts in green. So if we add those up together, 76 plus 3 plus 57. We would get 136 people, okay, which is what I have here, 136. For the next problem, it says exactly 2 types of memorabilia. So what we're doing in this case is we're noticing that this number here collects all 3. The ones that collect only 2 types are going to be these sections here, here, and here. So 27 plus 3, that adds up to 30, which is my answer right here. Okay. Part E, at least 1 type of memorabilia. Okay, so on this problem, the word at least is saying 1 or more. So what I'm looking at is everything inside of the circle, okay? This person collects 1. This person collects 2 types. These people collect 3 types. So here's 2 types, here's 1 type, and here's 1 type. So all of the people within the circle collect exactly 1 type. So all we're going to do with our calculator is go ahead and add them all up. So I have 76 plus 27 plus 63 plus 3 plus 2 plus 57. I have 228 people who collect at least 1 type of memorabilia. Okay. The way that I did this here is I said I took the whole population, which we knew was 250, and I subtracted the people who didn't collect any of that type of memorabilia, and it still came out to the exact same answer. Okay. And part F, none of the types of memorabilia. Well, if we had 228 who collected at least 1, that means 22 didn't collect any of that type of memorabilia. Okay, this is just basically the applications of Venn diagrams. You're going to have to know how to create them, so practice that, and then you're going to know how to read them. So if you create a Venn diagram and you answer the questions and you create the Venn diagram wrong, you're going to get your answers wrong as well. So practice these sections. This concludes this section. It actually concludes the unit. Let me know if you have any questions.